Thank you so much for joining us for worship. This is, of course, the day that the Lord has made, and He has given us to rejoice. He suggests that we rejoice. He commands us to rejoice and to be glad in it. In fact, I'll go so far as to say this is the year that the Lord has made, all 365 days. And we are to rejoice in each and every day that He grants us, because He provides His love, His mercies, and His grace toward us. And however we look at it, we're winners. We win at the end. So I welcome you again to worship with us, the Portsmouth United Church of Christ. I wish to thank each of you for your support, your prayers, your contributions, your gifts. We're here because you're here with us, and we bless you for it. We love you for it. We adore you for it, and we thank you. The Lord does have a word for us. We're talking about a writing coming out of Deuteronomy. The author there tells us in the 8th chapter, and that author, of course, being Moses, tells us in the 8th chapter, verses 2 through 3, he's given us to remember the long way that the Lord your God has led you these 40 years in the wilderness, in order to humble you, testing you to know what was in your heart, whether or not you would keep His commandments. He humbled you by letting you hunger, and then by feeding you manna with which neither you nor your ancestors were acquainted, in order to make you understand that one does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. Now, I'd like to just read that again. It's only 2 verses, but I'd like to reverse it to a personal perspective. We should remember the long way that the Lord, our God, has led us these 40 years in the wilderness, in order to humble us, testing us to know what was in our heart, whether or not we would keep His commandments. And He humbled us by letting us hunger, and then by feeding us with manna, with which neither our ancestors were acquainted or aware or had such an experience with God as this. And He did this in order to make us understand that we do not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. And hopefully that makes it a little bit more personal. I'd like to say first that God tests us as He did then with Israel. He still yet tests us because He loves us dearly and wants us to grow in His grace and in the knowledge of Him. This is why the Bible tells us we can rejoice when being tested. Testing gives us to grow in the knowledge of Him. A mother tests her baby so that the baby will gain knowledge of who's mom, who's dad, and who's a stranger. She tests the baby because she wants the baby to gain knowledge, to get an understanding of where comfort and safety is versus danger and harm. Being tested by God has been misunderstood by many. It is clear in the scriptures that God does test us. However, God does not send sickness, diseases, or calamity into our lives. Those things come to steal, to kill, and to destroy. And we know who's responsible for that. And even in that is a learning process. And even in calamities, we still call on God, and He delivers us. Let's look at this scripture a little closer, if we will. It is saying to us that we can look back over last year, 2020, and the years that we've lived up to that point. It gives us to remember the long way that the Lord our God has led us, be it 10, 20, 30, 40, 60, 70, 80, 90, however many years it has been. But it was God who led us through the wilderness in a world not designed for the new creature that we've become. We're new creatures. We're walking by the Spirit. We're assigned to earth, but we have become spiritual minded, and we are not as we were before, dependent on natural things and things that we can see, but rather we're walking by faith and not by sight. We're kind of awkward. We're peculiar people. And we've been assigned to be here that we might win souls, now that we've come into the knowledge of the truth. Once we acknowledge our sinful ways and clearly see the need to turn away from the natural things of this life and become embraced with the supernatural, and begin to believe in God's word and to allow that word to be activated in our lifestyles, we become different. Our conversations different, our understanding, our choice of interactions are completely different. The way we think is changed from the old to new. It's changed from the worldly concept of thinking and the fleshy thoughts to spiritual things. We're becoming more spiritual minded. The book of Deuteronomy begins by saying, "These are the words which Moses spoke to all of Israel beyond the Jordan in the wilderness." It happened in the 40th year. I think it was the 11th month and the first day of the month that Moses spoke to the children of Israel, but he speaks only what God has given him to speak. And this is one of the things he's telling them to remember: the long way that the Lord, your God, has led you these years. And so I reintroduce that declared word of Moses, spoken from the heart of God, reminding us to remember what he's done for us, where he has brought us already. Isn't that wonderful? Can we think back on what God has done in 2020 and the years prior to that? Has he forsaken? Absolutely not. Will he forsake? He's declared that he will never forsake us. That should give us joy. As we embrace the new 2021 and all that has come already, that has been presented, we should be excited about it, because we are the children of God, and we're the light in the world of darkness. We're the salt of the earth. The title of the message is Testing. Testing. One thing that God reveals in his writing is that Israel's very concerned about food. It seems that we as a people are concerned about food. Eating is very important to us. It's enjoyable, it's relaxing, it's sociable. And who doesn't enjoy eating good foods? But there comes a time when God will remove our comfort, those things that make us happy and comfortable, and he in turn will give us to have a need so that we'll call on him. He is then again doing what he needs to do to bring our attention to him. Oh, it's great. When Israel left Egypt after their stay of 400 years, they spent 40 years wandering in the wilderness before they entered the promised land. During this time, God provided substance for them to eat every day in the form of quail, which was a meat, and manna, which was a type of bread. Meat and bread is what he provided. And water was there. Basically, a word, this manna means, what is it? What is it? They didn't really have a name for it. It wasn't made from what they were accustomed to, making bread from wheat. This is a godly gourmet bread that's been provided. The Israelites would go and collect a daily portion of manna each day, ensuring to get a double portion before the Sabbath, because on the Sabbath they weren't to go search. They were not to work. That day has been consecrated unto God. And if they grabbed too much or too little, they suffered the consequences. But there was a penalty for that. But they didn't listen to Moses, and some left parts of it until morning. And when that happened, there were worms, and it was not available to be eaten ever again. It was foul. It was consumed by the elements that God provided to destroy it. Testing is a good thing, but most people do not like to be tested. Now, they like to test, but they don't like to be tested. Isn't that interesting? The title of the message is Testing. This is a scenario. Good parents know the importance of discipline, of setting clear limits and enforcing them faithfully. And I have seen, unfortunately, more than I'd like, of children being ruined by permissive parenting, children being misguided by permissive parenting. We have established rules and guidelines. We've given instruction and displayed examples of performing tasks or conducting or behaving or simply following orders of our house rules. And in the appointed time, we put these particular things to test for our children's benefit. There's a place and a thing for everything in the house. You've laid this out, you've shown examples, and you yourself have put these things where they belong. There are set requirements and rules that all conscientious parents put in place for their household. And the rules are to be followed. It's for the benefit of everybody. We can't have someone just having their way and coming and going at their own beckon and not considering others in the household, and definitely not by disrespecting the parents or being openly and overtly rebellious. So the parents put the children to the test. I was put to a test. You were put to a test. That's how we come to know the power and the love of the parent. So we learn when we're little, you put your toys back in the toy box. You don't leave them out. Someone can fall and trip on them. We don't want anyone to receive an injury, because that involves going to the doctor, going to the emergency room, etc., being made uncomfortable, wearing casts, all these things. We explain these things to our children. Then we show them the importance. And God forbid, if someone receives an injury, they fail to put their toy away, then that's when the discipline is necessary. This is when you have to actually paint the picture, make it more clearly, and point to, that's what caused the problem. And now your brother or your sister or whatever has suffered because of your negligence. And then, the child begins to see, I'm truly sorry. They become very sorrowful and they change their ways, and they don't do that anymore. That's the purpose of the testing. We test others all as well. A young lady may bring up the subject of marriage to test the guy that she's dating, to determine his intentions. The test may be in the form of a question. They might be watching a movie. They might have even attended a friend's wedding, or whatever it might be. But this young lady may take the liberty of just asking questions because she wants an answer. She's testing him. She's testing his heart, just like God does us. She will determine if her friend has genuine interest in her, and if they're in a state in their relationship where they can go into a higher level, or her testing is needed to make a proper decision as to whether she should continue seeing him. But she asks us these questions, and vice versa. He very well could do the same thing. Another scenario, a supervisor may have interest in promoting one of his workers and seeks to find out if the candidate has in mind would appreciate the opportunity for advancement. It's checking to see if this person would really want the new position that he has in mind. He's observed this worker. He's pleased with what he sees. So he asks this person to work in another department outside of his own, just to see how he reacts and to see what initiative he applies. And then it sometimes even asked to work hours that are extended or hours outside of his normal schedule or her normal schedule. And from the reactions, the behavior, the initiative, the insistence on performing, this gives the supervisor to determine, because he's testing the heart. Is this incumbent complaining? Are they seeming to show interest as they are learning something new? Are they using initiative, not asking questions, but looking at examples, checking previous outcomes of the process and following sequence? Are they taking adequate notes? These are the things the supervisor is looking at. And if by chance she or he performs well, then he surprises them with, "You'll be staying in this position. I'm pleased with what I've seen you do in the last few weeks or last few days. I felt that you would have been able to handle this assignment, but I've had the opportunity to witness that you would be the ideal person. Would you like to accept this position?" Testing the heart. Oh, we have to occasionally consider testing others as well as being tested. God tests us for our good, to show that in all cases, He alone is the provider of all things and knows the plans that He has for us. We're talking about testing. James goes on to write in the New Testament that, "My brothers and sisters, whether you face trials of any kind, consider it nothing but joy, because you know that the testing of your faith produces endurance. And let endurance have its full effect, so that you may be mature and complete, lacking in nothing." And so, being tested, we should count it all joy. Whatever we see in 2021, we're being tested. We've left out of 2020 with the coronavirus. There have been lives that have been taken by this horrible pandemic. There have been families that have been left without their loved ones, and they're grieving, heartbroken, lonely. Some have lost their place of employment, and financially it is a struggle. Others have lost their businesses and have had to shut down, and then they have their financial challenges. And these things were in 2020, and now we've come over because of the grace of God, and we see a glimpse of 2021. And even though the pandemic has come along, the things I've listed are still there. We're going to still say, "To God be the glory," because He has, as He said, remember the long way that the Lord your God has led you these 40 years, 50 years, 60 years, whatever number of years it is up until this hour. He's led you in the wilderness. And we've been in the wilderness in many instances, not knowing what to expect. We've been in a type of wilderness, not knowing what lies ahead. We've been in the wilderness even now. We're taking the COVID vaccine, and we're hoping that this resolves this matter, and that the prediction of other viruses of like kind or greater elevated COVID is in the areas, then we still are prayerful that God will take care of us. Need we fret or worry our little selves? These tests have come to make us strong. Strong in what? Prayer. We'll learn to talk to God more about these things that are taking place around about us. How can this make us better in fellowship, calling, texting, Facebooking our loved ones, staying in touch, waving our hands when we see a neighbor, driving courteously, giving the parking spaces to those who look like they have lots of baggage. They have little people. And take yourself out a little bit and walk the distance. Oh my gracious, what is God doing? He says, count it all joy when we see these things about us. Don't fret, don't worry. Don't panic. God took care of his people in the wilderness. That wilderness is somewhat like today. There are lion, tigers, and bears. Oh my. But God will take good care of us. Please keep that in mind. Testing. When we find ourselves being tested. There have been tests going on last year. Testing various formulas to make sure that these formulas will be the protective answer against the COVID-19. And success has come. But before the success came, before the solution could get into the valves, there had to be tests after tests. And these tests came to make us strong. Because had we not endured, we wouldn't have the muscle of a vaccine. We can give God thanks, and so we can be in prayer. God bless the vaccine. To all who are being administered the COVID-19 vaccine, bless it. Bless the contents of it. Give it to be a blessing to all who intake. Let it be a blessing to the body and building up the immune against the virus. Let it protect lives. Let it be a blessing to the nation and to the global population. Testing is good. Gives us a chance to walk by faith, to believe what we read, to have hope. I love you. Thank you so much for joining us. Remember, testing is good for us. Be a blessing. Be blessed. God loves you. I love you too.